Alright, let's sleep. Pull the blankets up to your chin. Fluff your pillow. Turn off your phone and let the darkness settle around you like a soft, warm cloak. Tonight, we're going to travel back in time to a world of castles and crusades, of troubadours and treachery, of a woman who was born into an age that expected women to be silent and obedient, and who became one of the most powerful and extraordinary figures in all of history. Her name was Eleanor of Aquitaine. She was a duchess in her own right, a queen of France, a queen of England, the mother of kings, a crusader, a prisoner, and a ruler who outlived her husbands and most of her children to become the grand old lady of Europe. She lived for 82 years, an almost unimaginable lifespan in the 12th century, and she packed more drama into her life than most people could fit into 10. This is her story. Part 1, The Heiress. The year is 1122. The place is the city of Poitiers, in the heart of what is now western France. But it is not France as we know it. This is Aquitaine, a vast and wealthy duchy that stretches from the Loire River in the north to the Pyrenees in the south, from the Atlantic Ocean in the west to the mountains of the Massif Central in the east. It is larger than the domain of the French king himself, and it is ruled by a man of immense power and ambition, William X, Duke of Aquitaine and Count of Poitiers. William X is a man of contradictions. He is a warrior, a patron of the arts, and a man of deep faith. He is also a man who has been excommunicated by the church for his treatment of his wife, a scandal that has rocked the courts of Europe. His wife, Eleanor de Châtellerault, has given him 3 children, 2 daughters, Eleanor and Petronilla, and a son, William Aigret. But William Aigret dies in infancy, leaving Eleanor as the heir to the vast Aquitaine. Eleanor grows up in the court of Poitiers, one of the most sophisticated and cultured courts in Europe. This is the world of the troubadours, the poets and musicians who sing of courtly love and chivalry. She learns to read and write, to ride and hunt, to dance and sing. She is educated in the arts of war and peace, and she is trained to rule. Her father, William X, is determined that his daughter will be more than just a bride, she will be a ruler. She is also beautiful. The chroniclers of her day describe her as elegant, comely, and of great beauty. She has striking features, large, intelligent eyes, a clear complexion, and a presence that can fill a room. But it is not just her beauty that makes her remarkable, it is her intelligence, her charm, and her sheer force of personality. Part 2, The Inheritance. In 1137, William X dies. He is on a pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela, in Spain, when he falls ill. He dies on the journey, leaving his 15-year-old daughter as the Duchess of Aquitaine. Eleanor is now the wealthiest and most eligible bride in Europe. Every king, every duke, every ambitious nobleman wants to marry her, and, with her, to gain control of Aquitaine. The King of France, Louis VI, is determined to secure her for his son and heir, Prince Louis. Louis VI sends his envoys to Poitiers, and they offer Eleanor a deal: marry Prince Louis, and become Queen of France. It is a dazzling prospect, and Eleanor accepts. She is 15 years old, Louis is 17. They are both children, but they are about to become the rulers of the most powerful kingdom in Europe. The wedding takes place on July 25, 1137, in the Cathedral of Saint-André in Bordeaux. Eleanor wears a magnificent gown, and her new husband wears a crown that has been hastily borrowed from a local church. The ceremony is grand, but it is also rushed. Louis VI is dying, and he wants to see his son marry before he passes. Within a month, the old king is dead, and Eleanor and Louis are crowned king and queen of France. They are both in their teens, and they are now the rulers of a vast and powerful kingdom. But the marriage is not a happy one. Louis is shy, pious, and deeply religious. He has been raised in a monastery, destined for the church, until his older brother died and he suddenly found himself heir to the throne. He is uncomfortable with power, uncomfortable with women, and deeply uncomfortable with the worldly, sophisticated world of Eleanor's Aquitanian court. Eleanor, by contrast, is lively, confident, and independent. She loves music, poetry, and the company of witty, intelligent people. She finds Louis boring and priggish. She tries to change him, but she cannot. The marriage settles into a pattern of mutual resentment. Part 3, The Crusade. In 1145, a crisis erupts. The Crusader states in the Holy Land are under threat from the Muslims, and the Pope calls for a new crusade, the Second Crusade. Louis, eager to prove his piety and his military prowess, decides to lead the expedition himself. And Eleanor, restless and ambitious, decides to go with him. It is an extraordinary decision. Women do not go on crusades. They stay at home, pray for their husbands, and manage the household while the men are away. But Eleanor is not an ordinary woman. She insists on accompanying Louis, and she gathers a retinue of ladies-in-waiting to join her. She also brings her own troops, a contingent of Aquitainian knights who are loyal to her, not to the king. The crusade is a disaster from start to finish. The army is poorly supplied, poorly led, and constantly harassed by the enemy. They march across Europe, through the Balkans and into Asia Minor, and everywhere they go, they face hardship and defeat. Louis proves to be a disastrous military leader, indecisive, timid, and unable to inspire his men. But Eleanor shines. She is brave, resourceful, and charismatic. She organizes supplies, negotiates with local rulers, and keeps the morale of her troops high. She also makes a powerful ally in her uncle, Raymond of Poitiers, who is the ruler of the Crusader state of Antioch. Raymond is a charismatic, sophisticated man, and he and Eleanor get on famously. They spend long hours talking, laughing, and, according to some rumors, sharing much more than conversation. Louis is furious. He is jealous of Raymond, suspicious of Eleanor, and deeply humiliated by his own failures. He orders Eleanor to leave Antioch, and when she refuses, he drags her away by force. The crusade continues to falter, and eventually, Louis and Eleanor return to France in disgrace. Part 4, The Annulment. The marriage is now beyond repair. Louis and Eleanor have 2 daughters, Marie and Alex, but no son, and Louis desperately needs a male heir. He begins to look for a way to end the marriage, and Eleanor, equally eager to escape, agrees. The annulment is granted on the grounds of consanguinity. They are too closely related, the Church says, for their marriage to be valid. On March 21, 1152, the marriage of Louis VII and Eleanor of Aquitaine is officially annulled. Eleanor is free. She is also still the Duchess of Aquitaine, and she is once again the most eligible bride in Europe. But freedom comes at a price. As Eleanor travels south to her ancestral lands, she is ambushed by a group of knights led by Geoffrey, the Count of Anjou. Geoffrey has a plan: kidnap Eleanor, marry her against her will, and seize control of Aquitaine. It is a brutal, cynical scheme, and it very nearly succeeds. But Eleanor is not a woman to be taken against her will. She escapes, how, we do not know, and she makes her way to the safety of her own lands. And then, she makes a decision that will change the course of history. She sends a message to Geoffrey's older brother, Henry Plantagenet. Henry is the Count of Anjou and the Duke of Normandy, and he is also the heir to the English throne. He is young, ambitious, and, by all accounts, intensely attractive. Eleanor proposes that he marry her instead. Henry is delighted. He is 19 years old, Eleanor is about 30, but age means nothing to him. He sees in Eleanor a chance to gain control of Aquitaine, the richest territory in Europe. He also sees a woman who is intelligent, powerful, and utterly captivating. On May 18, 1152, just 8 weeks after her annulment from Louis, Eleanor marries Henry Plantagenet. It is a quiet ceremony, without the pomp and splendor of her first wedding. But it is the beginning of a partnership that would reshape Europe. Part 5, The Queen of England. In 1154, Henry becomes King Henry II of England. Eleanor is now Queen of England, a title she will hold for the rest of her life. The couple rules an empire that stretches from the Scottish border to the Pyrenees, encompassing England, Normandy, Anjou, and Aquitaine. It is the largest domain in Europe, and it is held together by the force of their personalities. For the first decade of their marriage, Henry and Eleanor are a formidable team. They are both intelligent, ambitious, and ruthless. They work together to consolidate their power, to crush their enemies, and to build a strong, centralized government. Henry is a brilliant administrator and a tireless worker. Eleanor is a skilled diplomat and a shrewd political operator. They also have children, lots of them. Eleanor gives birth to 10 children over the course of her marriage, including 5 sons who survived to adulthood. The most famous of these are Henry the young king, Richard, who will later be known as the Lionheart, Geoffrey, and John, who will later be known as the worst king in English history. Eleanor dotes on her children, and she is fiercely protective of their interests. Part 6, The Rivalry. But as the years pass, the marriage begins to sour. Henry is a notorious womanizer, and he has numerous mistresses. He also begins to neglect Eleanor, treating her more as a political ally than as a wife. Eleanor, who has always been used to being the center of attention, resents this deeply. The most famous of Henry's mistresses is Rosamund Clifford, the Fair Rosamund. Henry builds her a secret bower at Woodstock, a maze of rooms and passages designed to hide her from Eleanor's jealous gaze. But the story goes that Eleanor finds her way through the maze, either by following a thread of silk or by bribing a servant, and confronts her rival. Rosamund is offered a choice, a dagger or a cup of poison. She chooses the poison, and she dies. The story is almost certainly a legend, but it captures the depth of Eleanor's anger and humiliation. The final straw comes in 1173. Henry the young king, Eleanor's eldest son, is frustrated with his lack of power. He is supposed to be the heir to the throne, but his father refuses to give him any real authority. So Henry the young king decides to rebel. He gathers a coalition of allies, including his brothers Richard and Geoffrey, and they launch a full-scale revolt against their father. And Eleanor, to the shock of everyone, supports them. Part 7, The Rebellion. It is the greatest betrayal a wife could commit against her husband. Eleanor, the Queen of England, the Duchess of Aquitaine, the mother of the king's children, has joined a rebellion against her own husband. She provides money, troops, and political support to her sons. She even sends her own bodyguard to protect them. The revolt is a disaster. Henry II is a brilliant military commander, and he crushes the rebellion with ruthless efficiency. The young king and his brothers flee to France, and Eleanor is captured. Henry is furious. He has trusted Eleanor, and she has betrayed him. He cannot execute her, she is the queen, and she is too powerful to kill, but he can imprison her. And he does. For the next 16 years, Eleanor is a prisoner. She is kept under house arrest in various castles across England, including Salisbury, Winchester, and Old Sarum. She is not allowed to see her children, not allowed to communicate with her allies, not allowed to participate in politics. She is a queen in name only, a prisoner in her own kingdom. But Eleanor does not give up. She uses her imprisonment to reflect, to plan, and to wait. She knows that her sons will not forget her. She knows that one day, she will be free. Part 8, The Freedom. In 1189, Henry II dies. His son, Richard, now known as Richard the Lionheart, ascends to the throne. And one of his first acts as king is to release his mother from prison. Eleanor is now in her late 60s, an old woman by the standards of the time. But she is not finished. Richard appoints her as his regent, the ruler of England in his absence, while he goes off on the Third Crusade. Eleanor accepts the role with enthusiasm, and she proves to be an extraordinarily capable ruler. She travels across England, settling disputes, raising money for Richard's crusade, and maintaining order in a kingdom that is often on the brink of chaos. She is tough, decisive, and utterly fearless. She also shows remarkable diplomatic skill, negotiating with the French king, the Pope, and various other rulers to protect England's interests. When Richard is captured and held for ransom by the Duke of Austria, Eleanor takes charge of the negotiations. She raises the enormous sum of 150,000 marks, a fortune, and secures Richard's release. It is one of the greatest diplomatic achievements of the century, and it is accomplished by a woman in her 70s. Part 9, The Final Years. Richard dies in 1199, and his brother John becomes king. John is a disaster, weak, greedy, and incompetent. He manages to lose most of the English possessions in France, including Normandy and Anjou. But Eleanor, now in her late 70s, continues to rule Aquitaine with an iron fist. She is determined to protect her ancestral lands, and she refuses to let John squander them. In 1200, at the age of about 78, Eleanor undertakes one last great journey. She travels across the Pyrenees mountains, through the harsh terrain of northern Spain, to the Kingdom of Castile. Her mission is to select a bride for her grandson, the future King of England. She chooses a young princess named Blanche of Castile, and she escorts her back across the mountains to France. It is an extraordinary journey for a woman of her age. The Pyrenees are treacherous, the weather is harsh, and the roads are dangerous. But Eleanor is not deterred. She is the Duchess of Aquitaine, and she has a job to do. She returns to her beloved Aquitaine, where she spends her final years. She lives at the Abbey of Fontevraud, a religious community that she has long supported. She is not a nun, she never takes religious vows, but she finds peace in the quiet rhythms of monastic life. On April 1, 1204, Eleanor dies. She is about 82 years old, an almost unimaginable age for the 12th century. She has outlived 2 husbands, most of her children, and nearly all of her contemporaries. She has been a queen, a crusader, a prisoner, and a ruler. She has shaped the destiny of England and France, and she has left an indelible mark on history. Part 10, The Legacy. Eleanor of Aquitaine is remembered as one of the most remarkable women of the Middle Ages. She was a patron of the arts, a supporter of the troubadours, and a champion of courtly love. She was a skilled politician, a shrewd diplomat, and a fearless leader. She was a mother who fought for her children, a wife who defied her husband, and a queen who refused to be silenced. Her legacy lived on through her descendants. Her sons, Richard and John, became kings of England. Her daughters married into the royal families of Europe. Her grandson, Henry III, continued the Plantagenet dynasty. And her great-grandson, Edward I, was one of the most powerful kings of the Middle Ages. But perhaps her greatest legacy was the example she set. In a world that told women to be quiet, Eleanor spoke. In a world that told women to obey, Eleanor commanded. In a world that told women to stay in their place, Eleanor traveled, fought, and ruled. She showed that a woman could be as powerful, as intelligent, and as ambitious as any man. Part 11, The Lessons. What can we learn from Eleanor's story? First, courage is not the absence of fear, it is the refusal to be defeated by it. Eleanor faced countless challenges throughout her life: the loss of her father, an unhappy marriage, a disastrous crusade, a humiliating annulment, a kidnapping attempt, a failed rebellion, and 16 years of imprisonment. But she never gave up. She always found a way to survive, to adapt, and to thrive. Second, intelligence is a weapon. Eleanor was not just beautiful, she was brilliant. She could read and write in Latin, she understood politics and diplomacy, and she knew how to manipulate the levers of power. In a world that undervalued women's intelligence, she used her mind to carve out a place for herself. Third, family is both a source of strength and a source of pain. Eleanor loved her children fiercely, but her sons also caused her the greatest heartbreak. She supported them in their rebellion, and she paid the price with 16 years of imprisonment. But she never stopped loving them, and they never stopped loving her. Fourth, age is no barrier to greatness. Eleanor was in her 70s when she undertook her final journey across the Pyrenees. She was in her 80s when she died. She never stopped working, never stopped fighting, never stopped living. She showed that old age is not an excuse to give up. And finally, the past is not a foreign country. Eleanor lived 800 years ago, but her struggles and triumphs are still relevant today. She fought for her rights, she challenged the status quo, and she refused to be defined by the expectations of others. She was a feminist before the word existed, a trailblazer who paved the way for generations of women to come. Part 12, The Dream. Now, as you drift off to sleep, think about Eleanor. Imagine her as a young girl in Bordeaux, riding through the vineyards of Aquitaine, her hair flying in the wind. Imagine her in the great hall of the French court, laughing at the pompous nobles who tried to impress her. Imagine her on the crusade, standing tall in the face of danger, refusing to be intimidated by the enemy. Imagine her in prison, sitting in a cold stone room, waiting for her sons to rescue her. Imagine her freedom, her joy, her determination to make the most of every moment. Imagine her final journey, crossing the Pyrenees at the age of 78, her spirit unbroken. And then imagine her at Fontevraud, in the quiet of the abbey, surrounded by the books and the music that she loved. Imagine her looking back on her life, the triumphs, the tragedies, the loves, the losses, and knowing that she had lived it on her own terms. She did not win every battle. She made mistakes, she suffered defeats, and she endured terrible pain. But she never stopped fighting, never stopped hoping, never stopped believing that she could make a difference. And she did. Part 13, The Final Reflection. So tonight, as you lie in your warm bed, in your safe home, surrounded by the people you love, think of Eleanor. Think of her courage, her intelligence, her resilience. Think of her refusal to be silenced, her determination to live life on her own terms. And let her story inspire you to be brave, to be bold, and to never give up. Eleanor of Aquitaine lived in a world of castles and crusades, of troubadours and treachery, of men who ruled and women who obeyed. But she refused to obey. She ruled, she fought, she loved, and she lived. She was a lioness in winter, a queen who refused to be tamed. And her story, like the woman herself, will never be forgotten. Sleep well. Sleep deeply. And may your dreams be filled with the songs of the troubadours, the beauty of Aquitaine, and the spirit of a queen who would not be silenced. Good night.